Welcome back to Think Design Work Smart. I'm Alex Bolboaca and I'm coming at you from the Mozaic Works studios. And what I have for you today is we need to go through some of the things that happened with AI because things get very heated. And we are particularly interested in this channel in effects on software development. And while these effects still seem kind of far away, I believe that they will come. So we need to be aware of the things that are happening. At least that's what I'm thinking. So let's go a little bit through some of the important things that I've seen. And this is definitely not everything that's going on because there's a lot of things that happening. But hopefully we'll start an interesting conversation about this with you commenting and maybe adding more context. So let's see. First thing, in an article from 5th of November 2024, MIT News, despite its impressive output, generative AI doesn't have a coherent understanding of the world. Researchers showed that even the best performing large language models don't form a true model of the world and its rules and can thus fail unexpectedly on similar tasks. And what they did is, let me quote from this, the researcher found that a popular type of generative AI model, which seems to be ChatGPT, can provide turn-by-turn driving directions in New York City with near-perfect accuracy without having formed an accurate internal map of the city. Despite the model's uncanny ability to navigate effectively when the researchers closed some streets and added detours, its performance plummeted. When they dug deeper, the researchers found that the newer maps the model implicitly generated had many non-existent streets curving between the grid and connecting faraway intersections. This could have serious implications for generative AI models deployed in the real world, since a model that seems to be performing well in one context might break down if the task or environment slightly changes. And this is something that we discussed before, more or less. We talked about hallucinations and how basically this is the way of work for LLMs. We talked about how they don't have necessarily a view of the world, right? They don't really understand the world. We may think that they understand the world, but that can be something that comes from our biases. So this was interesting. But this is all news in terms of AI. And I'm going to link to this below because the article is very interesting. Then we got this piece of news from, let's see, when was this? January 24. The first AI software engineer is bungling the vast majority of tasks he's asked to do. It took longer than a human and failed the vast majority of tasks. This is from Futurism. And it's about the Devin model, which is an agent able, at least it was touted as able to take jobs for software engineers, and apparently not that good. Researchers have found that AI tech company Cognition's Devin, which it claims to be the first AI software engineering, is astonishingly bad at its job. In a recent analysis first spotted by the Register, a team of machine learning data scientists behind the independent AI research and development lab Answer.ai spent a month with the AI assistant, concluding that despite almost a year of hype, it rarely worked. Out of 20 tasks we attempted, we saw 14 failures, 3 inconclusive results, and just 3 successes, the researchers found, a meager success rate of just 15%. Super, we've all had coworkers like that. But for tech that's supposed to represent the future, it's not inspiring confidence. More concerning was our inability to predict which tasks would succeed. Even tasks similar to our early wins would fail in complex, time-consuming ways. The autonomous nature that seemed promising became a liability. Devin would spend days pursuing impossible solutions rather than recognizing fundamental blockers. For instance, Devin was asked to deploy multiple applications to a deployment platform called Railway, but instead of realizing it was not actually possible to do this, Devin marched forward and tried to do this and hallucinated some things about how to interact with Railway. So again, this is a longer article, but this is kind of where we are. It seems that AI agents, which are, as I said in the beginning of the year, I think that AI agents are the future of AI. It doesn't seem that we'll have AGI, but rather we'll have specialized agents that do one specific thing. But apparently software engineering is too much. Now, this still doesn't close the door for something like an agent that would write tests, an agent that would refactor, an agent that would generate some code that works, even though it's not necessarily the best, and so on. So maybe with a combination of agents, you can still get there. But the question is still open. Can we use them in a reliable way? Okay, and this is where we are. And actually, this is where we were until the news dropped. China's DeepSeek just dropped the free challengers to OpenAI's O1. Here's how to use it on your PC. So maybe you've seen this because DeepSeek was dropped in a few days ago, and it basically did a lot of havoc on the AI industry. The stock exchange fell. There were a lot of, Nvidia stocks fell by, I don't know, 16% or something like that. They started to recover, if I remember correctly, since then. And there was a big hit when this model dropped. And the question is, and first question was, okay, is this about hype or is this about something else? Because one thing we know about AI in general is that there is a lot of hype. And we've seen this again and again. Devin, was the model we discussed previously as an AI engineer. It was talked about as being great and solving problems like 1 year ago, and it turns out it's not that great. So there is a lot of hype, a lot of people pushing their agendas. And so when I heard, okay, we have a Chinese model that dropped and a lot of things happen, is this a normal correction because of the hype, or is there something behind this that is more interesting? And it turns out that there is something behind this, and it's something very important. Chinese AI startup this week unveiled a family of LLMs it claims not only replicates OpenAI's own reasoning capabilities, but challenging the American model builder's dominance in a whole host of benchmarks. Founded in 2023 by Chinese entrepreneur Liang Wenfeng, I hope I read that correctly, probably not, and funded by his quantitative hedge fund Highflyer, DeepSeek has now shared a number of highly competitive, openly available, and this is one of the keys, openly available machine learning models despite America's effort to keep AI acceleration out of China. I'm going to come back to this because there are a number of effects that we need to discuss. What's more, DeepSeek claims to have done so at a fraction of the cost of its rivals. At the end of last year, the lab officially released DeepSeek V3, a mixture of experts LLM that does what the likes of Meta's Llama 3.1, OpenAI GPT-4o, and Anthropic Claude 3.5 Sonnet can do. Now it's released R1, a reasoning model fine-tuned from V3. While big names in the West are spending tens of billions of dollars or millions of GPUs a year, DeepSeek V3 is said to have been trained on 14.8 trillion tokens using 2048 NVIDIA H800s, totaling about 2.788 million GPU hours at a cost of roughly 5.58 million. At 671 billion parameters, 37 billion of which are activated for each token during inference. This is another very important thing. DeepSeek R1 was trained primarily using reinforcement learning to utilize chain of thought reasoning. If you are curious, you can learn more about the process in DeepSeek's paper. If you are not familiar with the chain of thought models like R1 and OpenAI O1, they differ from conventional LLM in that they don't just spit out a one and done answer to your question. Instead, the model first breaks down requests into a chain of thoughts, giving them an opportunity to reflect on the input and identify or correct any flawed reasoning or hallucinations in the output before responding with the final answer. Thus, you are supposed to get a more logical, lucid, and accurate result from them. Assuming DeepSeek's benchmarks can be believed, R1 manages to achieve performance on par with OpenAI's O1 and even exceeds its performance in the Math 500 test. Okay, and then there's a whole lot of things about tests. Let's look at one example because I think, or a few examples that talk about chain of thoughts, and then let me go back to consequences because those are very interesting. So first question you could ask an LLMs: how many R's are in the word strawberry? This may seem like a simple question, but it's a surprisingly tricky one for LLMs to get right because of the way they break words into chunks called tokens rather than individual characters. Because of this, models tend to struggle at tasks that involve counting, commonly insisting there are only 2 R's in strawberry rather than 3. Similar to one, DeepSeek's R1 doesn't seem to suffer from this problem, identifying the correct number of R's on the first attempt. Can do the same for how many S's in Mississippi, how many vowels are in airborne. The smaller distill models, unfortunately, weren't so reliable, as I would expect. What about mathematics? Okay, so there are some there's a multiplication, there's a division, there's a simple equation that you can give, and you are searching for certain answers. This is, let's say, less important for now, or less interesting. What I find more interesting is these types of questions. The farmer crossing a river with a wolf, goat, and cabbage problem, right? This is a common problem that we learn and play with as children, and many of the LLMs don't get it right, but apparently the R1, 671 billion and 70 billion were able to ask the riddle correctly. The others were not. So then there's spatial reasoning. Problems like Ellen, Bob, Colin, Dave, and Emily are standing in a circle. Ellen is on Bob's immediate left, Bob is on Colin's immediate left, Colin is on Dave's immediate left, Dave is on Emily's immediate left, who is on Ellen's immediate right? Can do that. Okay, maybe you need to draw. Probably you need to draw, at least I would. But LLMs don't get this right, and here we can see that in case of DeepSeek's latest model, all but the 8 billion and 1.5 billion distillation were able to answer the question correctly on their first attempt. So it seems that it's doing something right. Now, is it perfect? No. And that's not the point. O1, the OpenAI model, is not perfect either. And then there are, of course, other issues with it. It's censored because it comes from China, and so on. But there are a few things that are very important. First, It's many people focus on the geopolitical aspects. The US has tried to keep its advantage by limiting hardware sales to China and other countries. This model seems to be leveling the field. I won't go into more details here because I'm not a specialist in that, so it's just worth mentioning that it's not something that I can discuss in a lot of detail. Another thing, however, there are two things that are important here, or maybe three. Most important, this is an open model. You can download it, you can run it, and second thing, which is very important, it runs on hardware that is more available, less expensive. Again, incredible. So this is a big advantage, right? And we'll discuss a little bit about the effects of this. And the third one is the way it's been trained. And the way it's been trained is by doing a bunch of, so instead of doing labeled data. So how would you train a chain of thought? Let's talk about this a little bit. You could take a problem, and you need a lot of problems, and define chain of thoughts for each of these problems, and then pass them in as inputs and outputs that are labeled to the model, very simplified, and let the model train until it matches these chains of thought. But what they did was different. What they did was reinforced learning, which means they gave it questions and reinforced the behavior of the model when it generated a chain of thought. And prove that by doing that, you can actually get very good results. Now, this means that it is actually running, it's easier to train. And because of other things, they were also able to train it on lower grade hardware. It's still not inexpensive. it's expensive hardware, but much less expensive than what was required until recently. And I learned about this from the computer file video, DeepSeek of a game changer for AI. This is a very good video. I'm going to point to it in the description. So another thing that's very important here is the way it runs. And the way it runs, they mentioned the mix of experts. So this basically means that different parts of the network are trained for different things, which also allows you to run it on smaller grade hardware because it's much like microservices, right? It scales up and down depending on what you need. Roughly, okay, it's not exactly that, but roughly. So this is why it's a game changer. And now, what does this mean? And to go back to software development and security, cybersecurity. What this means is that organizations like universities can now train their own models if they have enough infrastructure, and they usually do, because it's cheaper now. It's easier to do. They can run their own models. You can run your own model locally with lower grade hardware. There's a lot more people can do a lot more things with AI, basically. And this means that it's likely that the progress towards agents will get faster, will speed up. because more organizations are able to try out things. These are open models. They can build upon them, and they can get better, faster results, cheaper. So on one hand, if you are AI researcher, this is great news because you can go wild. Well, maybe not go wild, but at least do more than you were doing until now. What it's in mind mean, and my prediction is that we'll get better agents in a few months because more organizations will be able to do this. What does this mean for software development? Well, likely there will be some parts of our job that agents will be able to do better than what we have until now. That's my prediction. Now, will they be perfect? No, of course not. And my feeling is that we'll need people to overview and manage all the outputs if we are serious about this. But this might mean a reduction in the necessary number of people to build software. Okay. For specific roles, so on. It might mean also that we need other types of people, other types of skills actually to deal with all this. Now, will this happen overnight? No. Enterprises will still have a long time to adopt this, probably up to years. Based on how I know change is happening in large companies, yeah, this will take years, most likely. But it's good to be prepared. So I would encourage you to play around with these models because you can download them, you can run them, you can see what they can do. And it's a good thing if you can be a little bit ahead of the curve and understand how to use them, then it might be a good thing. Another important thing is cybersecurity. What this means, since more people can train models, can run models, can build models, this can be used like any technology for good or for bad. So we'll probably have additional threats that are coming due to specialized agents trained and bots that are much more sophisticated than we had until now, and that don't necessarily come from state actors or large organizations or, let's say, well-funded criminal organizations. But they can come from your out of the wild hacker. Let me remind you that one thing that I said was very surprising to me last year is when I found out that there's basically a software as a service industry around hacking systems and encrypting data and asking for a ransom. The whole ransomware process is now software as a service on the dark web. Now imagine if you add AI to this and you have software as a service AI agents for hacking, cracking, all kinds of stuff. This means that you will need to learn, or I would advise you to learn more about cybersecurity. I think it's a really good idea right now. Now, as always, I cannot tell the future. Okay. These are just informed opinions. Maybe, and let's be clear that the situation is very volatile right now. Things can change at any moment. We don't know in which direction these agents will go. But this is where we are. So, that's it from me today. What do you think about all this? Let me know in the comments. I'm gonna drop these links. I highly encourage you to read through these articles, to watch through the computer file video. It's very informative. Play around with the models and let us know what you think. We love comments, so yeah, let's have some chats. Thank you kindly for the view, and remember to think design and work smart. See you next Saturday.